With question 11 of the Summa Theologia Prima Secunda, we talk about enjoyment, which is an act of the will. And what's really interesting and fascinating and I think brilliant about St. Thomas Aquinas is he takes a word like enjoyment, which we use all the time. We probably don't think too much about it. We enjoy something. Enjoyment is a passion that we feel. But what he does is he fits it within the context of the human person, because as I said yesterday, in order to understand the Summa, you have to understand the different faculties of the human person, what is associated with the intellect, what's associated with the will, the passions, the appetites, and something as simple as enjoyment. Like I said, he is not going to just take it at face value, but instead he wants to really see where it is to be assigned as far as what faculty of the human person and how it kind of plays into the big picture of the human person and our journey towards God, right? So having said that, this one is not very long. It's 4 articles. And again, it's of enjoyment, which is the act of the will. Now, because he already has kind of shown his cards that this is going to be an act of the will. It's not going to be an act of the intellect. It's going to be an act of the will, which is a sensitive desire. I'm sorry, not a sensitive desire. It's an intellectual desire, an intellectual appetite. So just kind of keep that in mind. Article 1 says, whether to enjoy is an act of the appetitive power. Now, the fact that the very title of this question refers to it as being an act of the will, you know already that it's going to be appetitive as opposed to apprehensive, which is an act of the intellect, which we apprehend something, we come to know it, we abstract the form, as we learned about before. So Thomas says here, now those things are most manifest to us, which appeal most to the senses. Wherefore it seems that the word fruition is derived from sensible fruits. Now, keep in mind the analogy he's making here is that when a tree is planted with a seed and it grows to maturity, and then eventually it produces fruit. So the fruit which comes from the tree is the end. Now, granted, it's going to continue to grow fruit, but the purpose of the tree really is to grow fruit. And so once the fruit is grown and enjoyed, it has accomplished its goal, right? So this is the end. But sensible fruit is that which we expect the tree to produce in the last place, and in which a certain sweetness is to be perceived. Hence, fruition seems to have relation to love or the delight which one has in realizing the longed-for term, which is the end. Okay, as I just explained a moment ago, the fruit is what comes at the end of a tree. And that's what we enjoy. That's the sweetness, that's the goodness of it, right? Now, the end and the good is the object of the appetitive power, wherefore it is evident that fruition is the act of the appetitive power. Article 2 says whether to enjoy belongs to the rational creature alone or to the irrational creature. So here's a picture of a dog. Can the dog experience enjoyment? Okay, I think most people would say, yeah, of course, when it's frolicking or playing with its owner, it's enjoying its time, or if it's, whatever, eating a bone or whatever it does for enjoyment. But Thomas is going to say to enjoy is not the act of the power that achieves the end as executor, but of the power that commands the achievement. For it has been said to belong to the appetitive power, which of course is the will, right? That's what commands. Now, things void of reason have indeed a power of achieving an end by way of execution, as that by which a heavy body has a downward tendency, whereas a light body has an upward tendency. Yet, the power of command in respect of the end is not in them. Okay, he's saying they don't have wills. They're not able to command as human beings can or angels can. They don't have that power because they don't have intellectual appetites or wills. But in some higher nature, which moves all nature by its command, just as in things endowed with knowledge, the appetite moves the other powers to their acts. Wherefore it is clear that things void of knowledge, like although they attain an end, have no enjoyment of the end, This is only for those that are endowed with knowledge. Okay, so the dog has some limited knowledge, but it's not able to know things. It's not able to abstract phantasms. It doesn't have any sense of a universal knowledge or a universal goal. Thomas continues, now knowledge of the end is twofold, perfect and imperfect. Perfect knowledge of the end is that whereby not only is that known, which is the end and the good, but also the universal formality of the end and the good, and such knowledge belongs to the rational nature alone. Okay, universal is such an important word in the Summa Theologia. The intellect is associated with the universal true, the will with the universal good, right? So there's a lot of little goods in between, but the absolute universal good is God, and no irrational creature nobody can comprehend God, but nobody can come to know God unless they have reason. On the other hand, imperfect knowledge is that by which the end and the good are known in the particular. Okay, this is what the dog can do. It can recognize the good in the particular. Such knowledge is in irrational animals whose appetitive powers do not command with freedom, but are moved according to a natural instinct to whatever they apprehend. Consequently, enjoyment belongs to the rational nature at a perfect degree, to irrational creatures imperfectly, to other creatures not at all. So he's saying, okay, the irrational creatures may have some imperfect sense of enjoyment, but certainly not in the perfect sense. Article 3, whether enjoyment is only of the last end. Now, we think of the last end as being heaven, right? So can we only enjoy heaven, or can we enjoy things on the pathway to heaven? The notion of fruit implies two things. First, that it should come last. Second, that it should calm the appetite with a certain sweetness and delight. Now, a thing is last either simply or relatively. Simply if it be referred to nothing else. Relatively if it is the last of a particular series. Okay, not the ultimate end, but it's the last in a series. Therefore, that which is last simply, and in which one delights as in the last end, is properly called fruit. And this it is that one is properly said to enjoy. But that which is delightful not in itself, but is desired only as referred to something else, that is, a bitter potion for the sake of health, can nowise be called fruit. Now, Thomas uses the example a lot of, you take a bitter potion in order to get better health. If you ever had a colonoscopy, you've got to drink all this nasty stuff the night before. At least that's the way they used to do it. Believe me, I'm speaking from personal experience. But why? Because there's some greater good that you're experiencing, even though the means to that are pretty bad. And that which has something delightful about it, to which a number of preceding things are referred, may indeed be called fruit in a certain manner, but we cannot be said to enjoy it properly as though it answered perfectly to the notion of fruit. Hence, Augustine says, we enjoy what we know when the delighted will is at rest therein. But its rest is not absolute save the possession of the last end, for as long as something is looked for, the movement of the will remains in suspense, although it has reached something. Thus, in local movement, although any point between the two terms is the beginning and the end, yet it is not considered an actual end except when the movement stops there. So technically, he's saying we can't really enjoy anything until the last end. Okay, perfect enjoyment is going to be our final end. It's going to be union with God, and that's when we'll truly be able to enjoy. But there is some imperfect participation of this enjoyment here below. Finally, Article 4, whether enjoyment is only of the end possessed. To enjoy implies a certain relation of the will to the last end, according as the will has something by way of last end. Now, an end is possessed in two ways, perfectly and imperfectly. Perfectly, when it is possessed not only in intention, but also in reality. Okay, it's resting in the good. Imperfectly, when it is possessed in intention only, perfect enjoyment, therefore, is of the end already possessed, but imperfect enjoyment is also of the end possessed not not really, but only in intention. So we intend to get to heaven. We intend to have that perfect fruition of enjoyment. And so all these things that we participate in, we experience here below, that participation is the intention that we have of ultimately resting in God. But true enjoyment, according to St. Thomas Aquinas, is not going to happen until the end is realized and we rest in that end. St. Thomas Aquinas, pray for us. God bless you.